guess quick introduction for those listening is, well, you randomly got assigned to us for our Trova trip.
Absolutely.
And so
Pure accident, basically.
Pure accident. So we weren't supposed to have you as our host. Yet it worked out really, really well.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, man.
Really incredible trip, Baddi. I guess we'll give a little bit of your background. I know that you didn't start doing this, but this has now become a recent passion.
Absolutely. Long story, grow up with parents that love to travel, took me out at a very young age. I sort of already got the bug, the traveling bug. Loved being out and about. As a child, more or less covered all of Iceland, you could say, or most of it, and just fell in love with the outdoors. And ADHD kid.
I'm very, very familiar.
Being out and about and on the move fits me really well. And then later on got into all sorts of trouble, background, wild teenager, grow into the business world. Basically, most of my career was sales and marketing, and did really well. Went through several phases of making loads of money and realizing for some strange reason that just doesn't do it for me. I don't mind money, but it doesn't. It can't be it. It has to be something more to it. Accidentally got into guiding, all the way back in '99. I don't know how long we should go, but I've had these massive built-up 4x4s more or less for a long time. Right now, actually, this is the first time in years that I don't have one. I only have a minor one, we could say, 35 inches. But
is it a Land Cruiser?
Oh, my Nissan Patrol is mine, the gray one you saw yesterday.
Those are great.
Oh, brilliant and durable. Yeah. Don't break down easily. It's just, brilliant trucks. Absolutely. But I'm coming back from the Highlands in '99, from the middle of nowhere, middle of winter. We have like 6 feet of snow covering everything. I come back across this group, which is stuck in a river in ice. And accidentally, I had recently seen a video. This is '99. The internet was kind of
new. Sure, yeah.
But I had recently seen a video from Russia where they were getting a car out of ice. They did that by taking one of the spare tires, putting it next to the car at the rim of the ice, putting a rope over it, tying it down to the car inside the river, and then pulling back. And by doing it over the tire, it starts by lifting the car up over the rim of the ice, and then they're able to pull it back. So I was able to show off this new skill, something I'd never tried before.
Completely untested.
Completely untested, absolutely. And they obviously instantly thought I was some kind of a genius. And a few weeks later, the guy that I saved there, basically, he was on a tour with tourists.
Mm-hmm.
Started calling and just checking, would you be available possibly to start taking out groups? And just one thing led to another. And I did this as a side thing along with my other businesses.
Now, what was the other business?
Well, at one point I was a Remax franchise holder and a Remax broker, you could say.
So real estate.
Okay. Advertising. I was a director of sales for a couple of the 2 biggest newspapers in different times. All of these 3 basically very lucrative, extremely stressful. Especially in real estate, when in business, I love business to business, but real estate is personal, high anxiety. Everybody's terrified that they're losing all their money or somebody's sort of out to get them or whatever it is. People are afraid. The neural system is set to maximum, and I just didn't like it. This is during the craziest phase in real estate in Iceland. In a matter of 4 years, the prices rose 60%. 60.
So we basically saw the same thing.
Yeah. In the U.S. Yeah.
We just caused the crash.
Well,
everyone together.
You created this beautiful idea of bundling trash together and by that being able to sell it for more. It's just an incredible idea. But basically, I somehow this pulled me. The guiding, being outside. I love nature, and this really seems to combine in me two things I love the most, and that's connection with people and connection with nature. And being out there, seeing, taking people out that often have very little contact with nature or had little contact with nature, and seeing them somehow connect to the element and become one with it, and possibly relaxing, really relaxing for the first time, for God knows how long. Taking out people that are born and raised in Manhattan or
Sure.
in concrete somewhere,
Sure.
and they haven't had this real experiences. Seeing that happen is just phenomenally fulfilling. It's just. And yeah, in 2016, me and my wife were in Sedona, both having some kind of a spiritual experience. I kind of laid it out there, I'm a director of sales for this newspaper. It is basically impossible from here on that I will ever make profits again. It's just a dying business.
It's a dying thing.
So, at the end of every week, there was never this feeling of conquering or, victory.
No, it's a fading light.
It's just, no matter how well we did, it was never enough. And the anxiety and the stress was just building. And I absolutely got to a point where I just, hated it. And so basically just asked, would you mind, we have a house, we have a couple of cars, we're probably able to travel every once in a while to places we love to go. Would you mind if I just get out of this business altogether? And luckily, she just loved the idea and was just like, yeah, I would love if you just leave that behind.
Were you still doing was that the only source of income at the time?
At the time, yes. It was a very lucrative job, you could say, but there was nothing else on the horizon.
Sure.
In a way. But my idea was basically to go into some kind of guiding full-time. Original idea was to sell a lot more trips myself than I actually did. I ended up being mainly in service for several different offices. 90 or close to 90% of my income before COVID was tours that somebody else sold and planned, and I just took care of the operation and running the tours. A little bit too easy, and it was too easy, because it wasn't the plan, It sort of just slid in there.
Yeah.
And, we were making brilliant income again, but when COVID hit, I realized that again, I was just lost in work, I was doing, the last year before COVID, I did something like, 300 and something days, so 14 to 16 hours a day.
That's a lot of time in a car around Iceland.
That's a lot of time away from the people you love, and sort of, I absolutely love it. Every single minute I spend out there is a minute I kind of treasure, but at the same time it's easy to forget where I really want to be moving or going. So COVID hit. I realized that the original plan of slowly building a small business and having all the time in the world to do whatever I wanted to do had somehow been lost on the way. So strangely, I had a few cars. It sounds simple, but those cars, altogether was like $300,000.
Sure.
And COVID hit, and so with a with an overhead of cost of about maybe $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, and no income, I decided that the safest thing would be to sell the cars. And one of them was this phenomenally built-up Mercedes Sprinter on, 46 inches tires, and a beast that sort of took me anywhere I wanted to go, and I absolutely loved it. But so, I was emotionally invested in it. It was a sad moment, sort of, when everything crashed, and the business just disappeared, and kind of anxious. But at the same time, it was big enough that I just let go. I didn't see any way to fight it, so I just I had at least in memory, I had like few seconds of almost complete anxiety and just what the is going on, and then I don't know what God is, but I just threw it out there.
I don't think anyone's quite got it figured out yet.
But I just sort of threw it out there. This is absolutely obviously something I can't deal with. If there's a plan out there, which I'm not really sure I would believe in that idea in the first place. But basically, I just let go and decided to go by the flow. Whatever happens. And I used the opportunity. Tourism crashed for 14 months in Iceland, and I had a brilliant, high quality time during that time with family, with friends. I went into studying coaching, which I always wanted to do.
What type of coaching?
Life coaching, just general, and just
so mentorships, life coaching.
Exactly, and helping people figure out where they want to go and how they want to get there.
Yeah,
and especially helping people to really figure out what they want themselves. Because so many people, it's probably the same in the US, but so many people are so invested in the ideas that are enforced on them,
Yeah.
This is where you come from, this is where you should be going. It's a lot of work to just throw all that stuff away and just try to figure out who the fuck am I?
Well, then you're off into the unknown. And the unknown is so scary because, people believe, I guess, the other path is this so much less risk
and more acceptance, easy acceptance.
Except for it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's handing over the keys to something else, and it's not for everyone. No. But I know for me, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is I feel like there's a lot of similarities in how you and I think on a lot of subjects, with what's important, what's the important things to be. And I mean, the fact that you're doing these tours in Iceland and getting to share this country that you obviously love with new people, you get a really cool chance to be their first Icelandic ambassador to this. And that's how I felt going into this Trova trip, and we had talked about it a little bit on the trip as, we've never done this before. I've never hosted a trip of strangers. I've taken friends places. I mean, in the 14 times that I've been to Iceland, I've always had someone new with us. And so you can't skip out on the South Coast, like between here and the Glacier Lagoon it's too good. And so I've been at least once every time I've been here to all those places, and I'm not bored of going to them.
Oh, wow. No.
Never. They're all incredible.
Yeah.
And, you being someone that what I've kind of determined and called was willing to hit the detonate button on it. It's really tough to turn that car around down a path where money's coming in and it's a bit uncertain in the future, but you saw it once in the newspaper industry. And I guess with that in the print sales, were the people above you like honest about that this was going to end, or were they on board with like, we can turn it around?
Oh, yeah, they lived in a fantasy that somebody with big pockets of money would swoop in one day and just
For what?
throw their money away into a newspaper.
That's not what people with bunches of money do.
Yeah. Well, if they have really good reasons, to use the media for their own, own good on some other level, they will dump money into it. But in Iceland, in a small market with, basically even our big newspapers are dwarfs compared to any media in the U.S.
Yeah, it's not the New York Times.
No, it's not going to happen.
And even that has had to totally pivot to online.
Oh, absolutely. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, these Guardian in the UK, they all had to figure out the way to. And they were lost for a while, and then they decided that pay per piece, per article or something would be a safe way to make something or pull something back. And
I find that a really interesting choice.
Hoping that people will be so invested in the idea of reading quality stuff. And the interesting thing there is we all believe that we are really interested in reading quality stuff.
We're not.
But we don't take the time to do it.
No, we read a headline and move on.
Oh, it's sort of...
And that's why the headlines are so... I mean, you wouldn't believe now, like, the more I'm starting to read, more articles on things I'm interested in, more political stuff, more world news, more things like that, and trying to get a varied idea of what's going on instead of just picking one source. So I have some idea of both sides of this argument, right, and figure out where I land. How many articles I notice are written by a computer? At the end of it, it just says produced by AI and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, it's just a headline.
They even signed it that way?
They seriously will say it at the bottom that this article was produced by...
Oh, my God. Automatic translation from something else? Or?
Yeah, and I mean, it's written like an article. And, I kind of have to look at it this way. Like, we're so new as a species with the amount of ability we have to communicate globally now and instantly. And because as consumers have decided that fast news is more important than accurate news, this is where we've landed. And most people believe the first one they read. Mm-hmm. And there's no truth to that. No. There's no truth to it. Whereas, oh man, the first time I remember that, I remember thinking like how behind print was I think when Michael Jackson died. And I don't know what year that was or how old I was, but I distinctly remember like hearing the news Michael Jackson had passed, and it must have happened on a weekend or Friday afternoon, something like that. Okay. And then Monday morning, I remember seeing a newspaper about Michael Jackson's death, and I just remember thinking like, fuck, are they still talking about that? And I'm like, oh, they haven't had a chance yet to talk about it.
This is the first publication.
This is the first time they've gotten a chance, and like this news is forever old. And I realized like how quickly Twitter had changed everything. Mm-hmm. And this will be a technology that we're gonna have to figure out. And I really do think a lot of the issues that we run into are growing pains of the pendulum swing. We went from a journalistic thing that was, I don't know if I want to say has more integrity or any of that, but we went from a journalistic style that had time for fact checking and had time for interviews.
And checking both sides,
Right.
Instead of just taking one side of the story and printing it.
And as a society, because we've told, and look, I'm one who takes accountability and responsibility for everything, including if I'm not what I believe is part of the problem, but if people are, that's a me. Mm-hmm. And we decide fast is more important than accurate, and then we tell them that, so that's what they give us. That's our fault. If we quit reading bullshit and quit taking bullshit as true, they'll go back the other way. They'll follow where the money goes, to which articles are getting read more.
Absolutely, of course.
But it doesn't seem that's the direction.
They'll almost know before it happens, but it's still... while working in media, we tried this numerous times to write these phenomenally high quality, articles about serious stuff, sometimes about day-to-day life. Those articles actually were more commonly read than the really important ones.
Well, people relate.
But wherever Justin Bieber was always number one, Britney Spears knickers was number one. It's just like all the pink stuff, they call that easy or yellow, it's just... It was always number one.
I do find it interesting that's pretty much globally is how it changed. And it wasn't that even,
Absolutely.
I guess, I kind of figure with, the bit of segregation from the rest of the planet of being on an island that maybe world news doesn't seem as pertinent here. You feel insulated from it.
No, we're actually kind of addicted to it. It's growing up on a frigid, isolated island in the middle of nowhere makes you very curious about the outside world. But at the same time, the same evolution is happening here as you described in the U.S., that we're still looking on what's happening in the outside world. But it's becoming more, how can I put it? The whole media world is becoming like a new echo chamber. You're not hearing the whole story. You're sort of just hearing the shout outs, sort of, this is happening, and you click on something to see what's happening, and it doesn't tell you what's actually happening.
Doesn't give you any information.
It just says this is happening, and so even if you wanted to really go deep, there are rare opportunities to actually do that. And as consumers, as a general consumers, we're not really looking for it, which is why it's not out there.
And which is another spot that we pass responsibility off to the media, which that is not their job.
No, they're just following where the money is.
Yeah, they're selling advertising. I try to explain that to people with TV shows or any of this, and like the popularity in the U.S. of the NFL. You just use sporting things like that. If they did a study and found out more people would tune in to a blank screen that had a noise of a baby crying at full volume, that's what would be on every that's what they would give us.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it sells more. Like, there's not an artistic integrity to, like, we're going to showcase this sport.
No.
Like, that's not what it is. And I don't know why we think it was.
There are a couple of, media versions or, companies or pages out there that are really going for that high quality stuff. And generally they have all accepted, according to my knowledge at least, they've all accepted that they will just stay small.
Yeah, because you can't.
They have a passion for something, which is why they're doing it, but it's never going to be the big media.
Yeah, it makes me sad that that's what we're choosing. That we're choosing the other side. We're choosing to be pacified with information instead of get any honest information about it.
I'm tempted to be, to believe that's the case, but my optimistic side likes to believe that things are changing slowly.
Okay.
Because more and more people we meet are actually pressing the detonating button and just turning their backs on this stuff. And in man's history, we go through phases. And in just recent history, the last 400 or 500 years, which is
no time.
No time at all. We've gone through a couple of sexual revolutions. We've gone through, several phases where the church becomes everything, or some kind of religion becomes, some entity becomes everything. And we seem to go in waves. It's sort of, we break out of that. We become extremely liberal, which they tend to call sexual revolution, but it's, liberal in every kind of way. And then we move back to
full conservative.
Conservatism. And for some reason, that seems to be ongoing. And even though most of us, or a lot of us, obviously I can't generalize that, but even though a lot of us have sort of turned their way against traditional religion, at least, and personally, I kind of like the idea of our God. I've just no idea what that would be,
I have fallen on just, to me, prior to, I guess, dabbling within psychedelics and things like that, I was very confidently atheist. And now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that there's something bigger that connects us, and whether that's just connection to that we're the same as the earth, we're the same as the energy. Like, it's just energy.
Oh, it's just energy. Absolutely. For me, it's not a personality of some sort. And I just know that, take it back to something simple, which is phenomenally complicated. The Big Bang,
Sure.
Nothing exploded and created the universe. Just right there, it just doesn't add up. Something had to explode. Something had to cause an explosion, or somehow it was caused. I don't know. And I'm not saying it was a personality, or a being. It could have just been energy, but something happened. And I very truly sense in my life that when I decide to connect to that energy, whatever that is, I'm more at ease. I'm more relaxed. I'm better focused, and I love you guys more. I love my surroundings and people more.
Yeah, all of that speaks really, really loudly to the shift I've made as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that changing what's important. The detonate thing. We had a girl on the podcast, the episode that'll, I guess, currently airing or whatever it is, girl Melissa, and she was a weightlifter. And tons of anxiety, tons of stress, and freaking out about work and in weird relationships with guys and abuse and all this type of stuff, and got into this really big car wreck and shattered her pelvis, punctured a lung, really bad, and big traumatic brain injury from it.
Whoa.
And all of her anxiety's gone.
It's gone.
It doesn't exist.
Oh.
And so once it kind of went away, because she had a really big fear of travel, she had a big fear of all these unknowns. And she's sold everything and bought a van and lives in her van and travels around and does her own thing. And man, I don't understand how, if people look at that and aren't attracted to the idea of it, of just fuck it. Fuck it. Fuck playing by the rules anymore. I'll go do this other thing. But it's tricky because money helps.
Oh,
you can't do it without.
Yeah. You need some, at least.
You need some. You don't need all, and no one's going to win that game. Oh. That ladder is steep. If you're trying to get to the top of that hill, it's I find it a relatively unfulfilling one.
Yeah.
I think if money and I'm not against it by any means, but it has to be the side effect of doing the thing that you really enjoy. Otherwise, I don't know how sustainable
Absolutely. I think a lot of things come together there. The environmental consciousness is, it started growing. People started realizing that more stuff cannot be the solution. I'm not saying I don't like stuff, but an endless amount of stuff and no other drive, it just doesn't work out. And more, as I said before, more and more people seem to be sort of pushing the detonation button. People that before would have been too vain to openly admit, they are now seeking some kind of a spiritual or energetic-wise solution. And then whether it's microdosing or weed or just sound healing or whatever it is, just all around me at least, it really feels like more and more people are simply choosing that path and openly enjoying it. Maybe for a while they were doing it, behind curtains, closed curtains, but. And
now, do you notice that within Icelandic community as well?
Oh, absolutely. It's not a general thing yet.
Sure.
But it's
the same not in the States.
It's been increasing dramatically, and we always had a strong sort of spiritual side in Iceland. You can go all the way back to trolls and elves and all that. Believe in ghosts and all that stuff. But even though that are mostly mythology stories and stuff, having your grandmother read, what do you call it again? Read in the cup of coffee, leftovers.
Leave the grounds.
Yeah.
Is that something that's done here?
Lay the cards, sort of the elderly ladies in Iceland have always been somehow accepted as a media
shaman almost,
basically.
Right?
Which I've always found interesting. I've gone through phases where I believed and where I didn't believe. I went through a phase where I was actually very sort of envious that the elves seem to only appear to elderly ladies, and obviously, cynically, I would think that was some kind of a joke, and they were probably having nightmares, or just dreams. But for a long time now, personally, I've been at a level where my head doesn't believe any of it, and my heart believes all of it. And I just somehow came to a, we can call it mutual ground or so, just got to a place where I decided that I don't really need to follow the extreme logical,
not every time,
path every time. And following my heart more often makes me happier, more at ease. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. I'm just, I don't know. And we talked about this a little bit on the Trover trip, that all these sort of experiences that have a phenomenal impact on you, when you try to explain them to people, they very often sort of dwindle, or the magic kind of disappears, especially if you need to start sort of somehow debating what happened, it's sort of, so it's, for me, there's a lot of magic out there. There's a lot of magic in here somewhere, and I just need to somehow tread the path of not getting my head too involved in it, because it sort of kills it.
Yeah, I do the same. I really didn't realize until none of the COVID stuff, none of the weirdness that's currently going on with that, and misinformation on both sides, and the politicizing of every single thing. I'm aware that that's a tool of division. Mm-hmm. And the more as humans we're divided, the people running the show are winning, because they can't do it without us. So as long as they keep us bought in, they're winning.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't fall into full mystic magic either, because I guess where my beliefs fall, right? And so it really wasn't until stuff this week with the Afghanistan stuff that I really felt strange about the direction we're choosing to go with stuff. I threw rocks in a field, and I have a really not great degree from LSU. However, I just can't believe that this was the best solution, right? Like whatever we did there, and there's got to be some ways that we can do things better as a whole, as a society. And this past week that I got to share with you, was really so welcoming that, look, the universe put this in place. I believe that whatever it was aligned us with the opportunity to be here at the right time, that you ended up being our host, that we had this connection. Like, I don't know who the other host could have been, but the chances that I'm doing a podcast with them are very slim.
Yeah, probably.
And the fact that we had someone who was willing to put themselves out there, and it's a pretty vulnerable space to tell a group of strangers, let's do breath work. Yeah. And is that something you do on or try to with every trip?
In some ways, to just going for it with a group of 19 people that on the early in the second day of the trip, that's kind of wild. But I honestly believe that having you and Bonnie as sort of the hub that everybody connected to made that available.
We're both very interested in everything,
and not just that. You created the mutual trust. Even though whether they liked me already or not, they already had a base of trust that they could build on. They've been watching you guys, following you guys for a while, and what you stand for, the authenticity, as I told you before, I absolutely fell in love with you guys on this trip.
I really appreciate it, and us the same.
And I knew nothing about the past. I didn't, I hadn't watched any of the older episodes or seen any of what the work you were doing. I just fell in love because you're so bloody honest and authentic, straightforward. You are absolutely, you walk the walk.
Thank you.
And it's obvious.
And both of us felt that coming into it, that's what the opportunity of a trip like this is to get that one-on-one time with people. Because, I mean, like, I don't know what happens after I'm done. Mm-hmm. After the physical piece goes. Yeah. But I believe that energy that's me gets to live on. And whether that's the ripples that are left in the pond or the people that we got to directly affect, that's really important to me.
Oh, absolutely.
And I feel such a obligation to not be full of shit. Mm-hmm. And the other side of, with my journey of things and figuring myself out, man, one of the things I just can't tolerate at all anymore is lying to myself. And so if I'm unhappy or doing a thing that I find phony or any of that, I can't do it. It's physically painful.
That's beautiful.
And so it's the only way I got. And I'm glad people are into it.
Yeah. It's the only way.
Now, when did you start looking into breathwork practice or any of these type of things?
Well, I'm an addict. I sobered up basically a long time ago, 19 years old. Before that, I had 8 years of being
from 11
out there
to 19?
From the age of 11 till 19.
Man, that's a really tough age for chemicals.
Oh, absolutely. It messed me up in many ways. And these are the years where you're really learning social skills.
Right.
And my social skills were, mostly spent at night. Let's not go deep into that, but for a small community, it's really difficult to be on the other side for a long time in Iceland without sort of everybody knowing. But, sobered up at 19. I come from a brilliant, solid background. I love my parents. Obviously, every family has problems and some,
all families are unique.
Something is off in some way, but generally I come from a brilliant background, and I honestly believe that's the main reason for why I sobered up in the first attempt. It's just when I came out of the blackouts or whatever it was, I came into a world I kind of recognized, and I was okay in it.
Now, was there a single moment of like, we can't do this anymore?
Well, my wake-up call was basically halfway through treatment. Halfway through treatment, I realized that my mom had almost died. She got a brain tumor, and she was in a hospital for 9 months. Went through chemo and the laser stuff and everything. And that whole time, I visited her twice. Both times because Dad made me, because I wanted to, borrow her car, and he said, you can have the car if you go and see your mom. And I would go, and I felt horrible the whole time because I felt no connection to this person. There was just this woman lying in bed with tubes coming out of her, and I was sort of on the watch the whole time because I thought 15 minutes would be the politically correct time to stay, and basically I was sort of emotionally dead at that time. My only drive in life was more, and more stuff. I told you already.
Well, that works at 19.
Yeah. Well, it worked for a while.
And that's what you're told at 19.
Yeah, but more for me was more drugs basically, or more alcohol or whatever it was. And when I sobered up, it was basically the first time since 11 that I was clean, physically clean for a long enough time to catch up somehow. And when that caught up with me, that the woman that sort of, my mother, who I loved dearly, and she's passed away a while ago, but I loved her dearly, and we had obviously all sorts of relationship, but generally a great relationship. And when it dawned on me that I absolutely felt nothing being in that hospital, the only thing I felt was sort of you know,
uncomfortable
and restless. I just wanted to get out of there. And when that sort of dawned on me, that was the first moment where I kind of felt that it might be a good idea to turn my life around, you know, to do something different. Up to that point, I was sort of just doing what I knew would ease the family for a while, you know. And, you know, while using, there were so many people around me that had been going through treatment after treatment, and I kind of felt like the newbie, you know, that I'd never been to treatment, you know. It's like a drug abusing beginner, you know.
Sure.
So, you know, there were all sorts of things that sort of
the same as a criminal who hasn't gone to jail yet.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming, yeah. That's true. You know, but, you know, so there was all sorts of little things that sort of helped me accept to go to treatment. But this was basically the moment where I realized that I had been completely fucked up, you know, that I had lost myself completely to something without realizing. And, you know, that it probably would be a good idea to turn my life around. And for a while, I was kind of numb for a long time. You know, I smoked hash, which is was the thing in Iceland. We didn't really have weed until after 1990 sometimes, but so we were kind of smoking the heavy stuff, and I smoked it in such phenomenal proportions for years that it took me about 3 years after I sobered up to just sort of really, you know, come out of it. But, you know, it took a while. But around that time, when I kind of started waking up, you know, emotionally and spiritually probably again, I started searching, you know, I was a member of a 12-step program, which, you know, it's all about some kind of spiritual experiences, and I didn't really, at that time, connect to that strongly, and but at the same time, I was willing to sort of check it out. Why not, you know? And I went through a phase, sort of like a new age phase, where I just went all into all sorts of stuff.
I understand.
And, you know, it was fun, it was brilliant, it was, you know, but it was also a fantasy. Because being in there full time was basically a place where I didn't have to take responsibility for anything out there. Whenever I opened my eyes, you know, my life was still shitty, you know, not going anywhere, there was no progress. So, you know, you can just close your eyes and fantasize with the angels again or whatever.
Yeah, right.
So I got to a point after quite some time of that where I just sort of closed the doors completely. You know,
on that whole side of things.
Yeah, leave this insane experiences behind. You know, this was probably just some kind of an insanity. You know, locked the door, threw away the key, and just, you know, did life. And I did life for quite a long time. And, you know, life went well. You know, I was building a marriage and family and, you know, career, different kind of careers at the time, you know, but everything basically went brilliantly in so many ways. You know, life was going well, but I was kind of flat and often unhappy without realizing why. You know, I wasn't unhappy with my marriage. I wasn't unhappy with, you know, there was just something missing. Just like you said before, the need to leave something more behind than just a house, you know, or a fund for people to, you know, whatever it would be, just the need to leave something more behind and to really matter in some way, not necessarily grand scale, but to really, when you look back at the end of it, you look back and say, well, yeah, you know, it
money's
mattered.
not unique.
It mattered, you know. No,
money's not fucking unique, and anyone, like, if someone's goal is to get rich, you know, there's ways to do that.
Oh yeah.
But happy,
all sorts of ways to do
is
that.
a much trickier thing, and no matter what it is, it's what you bring, not what you earned, that affects the people around you, because you're the unique part. You're the one with your own perspective and experiences and ideas, and unless you're doing things
absolutely
to shift those paradigms, then all you are doing is being a financial,
and
that's not a father. That's not a partner.
Just another rat in the race, basically.
Yep.
What happened to me is that 2013 we did this huge road trip in the U.S. Went down to Sedona, met really good friends that live there, stayed with them for 2 weeks out of the 5 or almost 2 weeks out of the 5 we were on in the U.S. And Sedona just blew me up. While not believing that energy is some kind of a person, the experience of something just ripping me open was real.
Oh, yeah.
I was just lying there on the top of Cathedral Rock, which is this beautiful, red
incredible
rock. I wasn't there for that. I was on a hike.
Right.
So I climbed to the highest point I could get to, and I was just lying there on the warm rock with the sun above, and the Icelanders kind of like to get some vitamin D whenever they can, when they're out and about. And something just happened. I was just sort of torn open and somehow became spiritual again. While my head, still sort of, get out of there, man. What the fuck's wrong with you? This is, and with that came this deep happiness, basically, a sense of purpose that wasn't driven by money. It wasn't driven by equity. It wasn't driven by winning the race. It was mainly to connect, connect to, as I said at the beginning, I love connecting to nature, connecting to people. And it sort of evolved into, I take my responsibility to connect people to wherever they are. Seriously, I think if there's anything I can sort of leave behind on a grand scale, especially working as a guide, that's it. It's sort of to take you on a journey where you can unplug from your day-to-day life for a little while and have real experiences. And number one, if you never do that, you have no idea where you're going. It's an arrogant statement, but I honestly believe that I can make phenomenal plans about all sorts of stuff. But if I don't do it from that base, where I'm sort of just unplugged and here, and I've thrown away all the dependent connections to people and family, and where I sort of really experience me, and not from an egotistical point of view. It's just kind of pure you. It's from that point that you can really sense what you really want in life, where you really want to go. You can build plans from there. And it's not my job to give you ideas for plans.
Sure.
It's not my job to sort of try to lead you in a certain place. My job is first and foremost just to create a safe space. Here you can be whoever you want to be. And as I did on the tour with Trover Trip and you guys, when it was coming close to the end, to use the fire, which is, it seems, the most magical stuff we have around. Cause
we've done it forever.
Man,
people have been attracted by sitting by fire and holding conversation.
I've been fascinated by it my whole life. You sit some people, you light up a fire, you sit some people down, and within seconds they're just there somehow. And I think it's just in our genes. It's so strong within us that it's like a bridge to to, let's say, a bridge to real talk. It's just sort of what I love to be.
When Bonnie and I had gone down to Costa Rica and done our experience with ayahuasca, there's someone tending a fire the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's just outside of the ceremonial hut called a maloca. And they talk about in there, like, if you need to get out of the ceremony and go sit, like, here's a good place. Mm-hmm. And they're burning a little bit of sandalwood and things like that, right? And they talk about that fire, like, the fire's there for a reason. And so sit and connect with it and get rid of what's holding you back into it.
Oh, absolutely.
And make that conscious decision of have the awareness of being able to figure out what's holding your back and not holding you back, and not let your ego convince you it isn't.
Oh, absolutely.
I talked about it today with Hasey, you know, noticing now as I try to get more in touch with my own shit of like anxiety doesn't stress me out in a way now of, ooh, I need that to stop. It's way more, where's that coming from? We have to go that direction.
Oh, absolutely.
To fix this. We can't just run away from it. You know, and look, I'm far from sober. But you know, one of the things that they had talked about at Rhythmia when we had gone down to Costa Rica that I found very valuable in regards to chemicals, because you know, prior to ayahuasca, they really want you off of everything, whether that's SSRI, everything for a stretch. It interacts poorly with those things. And you know, people are asking, you know, well, what about drinking when I'm home, or what about weed, or what about, you know, whatever it is? And their response is, make sure you know what your intention is. And if your intention is to disconnect, you should probably check it. But if you're taking something to connect, it's different. And so, you know, Bonnie and I will use, you know, for me with his ADD, as I am, and you get it too, you know, cannabis has been a great tool for me to reel back in and narrow the focus onto where I'm at and being present.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's just fireworks in my head all the time, and I can't organize it, and I can't collect it. And I'm working on doing it without.
I used a lot of amphetamines, and I had no idea at the time that I was basically just self-medicating. You know.
Sure.
On amphetamines, I had this phenomenal focus, you know, and
well, that's what Adderall and Ritalin are. This is what we give kids. It's coke.
You know, in a week, I did everything I had been thinking about doing for a year and a half before that. But what I didn't realize is that cannabis does that for you too. And I didn't really realize that until years sober, when I started trying CBD oil, you know, for focus, and it just really got me there. You know, it's just. So even for an addict, there are all sorts of chemical, plant-based solutions, you know, that.
You know, and that's an interesting one. I find it really interesting where we draw the line of sober, right? Because, I mean, caffeine's is a psychoactive substance that we take every day. Yeah, all of it. You know, we do tons of things to alter our current state, even food and sugar.
Oh, definitely.
You know, so I've kind of just moved to a point now where I don't really believe in good and bad, but is this serving the direction you really want to go?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I love that sort of way of, you know, looking at it. Are you disconnecting or connecting, you know? Because, you know, for the addict, it can easily move to somewhere else. You know, you can believe that you're doing something.
Oh, you'll lie to yourself.
You know, you'll definitely do that. But, you know, I'm actually very intrigued by the idea of experiences with a guided mentor, you know, especially going far away, you know, South America, wherever it would be. It's a sort of like an isolated experience. You know, you're there for a very specific reason. Usually, people already usually know what kind of trauma or stuff they're gonna be, you know, dealing with, or you know, whatever comes out.
They may be aware that there's something they'd like to work on, but that's about it.
They might have an idea, and you know, they might even think it's that thing, and then something else happens. But that's still sort of like an isolated experience, guided, you know, mentored. And for me, there's a different, you know, there's a gap there, at least for the addicted personality, between doing that and then doing it by yourself at home.
Yeah.
Doing it in a group of people you trust might be different, but by yourself, it's so easy sort of to go, you know, go somewhere else than intended. But at the same time, you know, I love the fact that people are experimenting with it. I love the fact, obviously 90% of people don't have addictive problems,
Right.
that way. A lot of people might have it temporarily because of an incident in their life somewhere, some kind of trauma or some shit they can't deal with and are sort of running away from. But generally, simply being physically addicted to something is not a common thing. Like, I don't believe that. And I think it's brilliant. There's a small percentage of people that will kind of be born that way. And, I would count myself definitely as one of them, because there was no childhood trauma, there was no shit. It was just a fairly nice family, parents that worked a lot. And when I drank for the first time at 11, I realized that my life up to that point had been full of shit. And from here on, everything would be awesome.
Wow.
It just took me like that. And most people I've met, through 12-step programs and stuff, don't have that experience. It somehow gradually happened,
And yours was?
Mine was just instant. I just call it going Viking, I just sort of, fuck it all, this is awesome, I'm going this way. And it just, from 11 till 19, my whole purpose was just, what would be the English word for it? My complete abyss somehow. Just the more out of it I was, the happier I thought I was. Basically, I was.
Well, you don't have to deal with your own shit when you're that way.
And not realizing what ADHD was at the time, it just sort of, for the first time ever, I was somehow there. I was connected. Whether it was a good connection or not. So I don't know, but
I realized
what I'm sort of trying to get to is that for the general public, I think the plant-based experience to try to help you with sort of opening more up and getting to experiences and working shit out that you haven't been able to work out before, I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's just awesome. I love the fact that people are looking for different solutions than.
I just want more options for people. Yeah. I'm far from one who believes this is the way and the pharmaceutical stuff is a fail. I think we should have both. And I think we should have the option of both. And I think we ought to have talented caregivers in both realms. Because I look at everything's a chemical. And it has either a intended response within your system or one you don't want.
Well, for me, I think the sort of measurement I'd like to use is that, is it helping you grow or is it keeping you there? I don't know if it makes sense in English, but
no, that definitely makes sense.
You go to a psychiatrist and you describe what's going on in your life or how you feel, and he'll just bomb you with stuff that numbs you. And, do you still feel pain? No, okay, then we're good. But that's not,
well, that's fixing a side effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's just working on the side effects. And so, regular kind of medication, it's awesome. It's helped so many people. My dad would be, one example. Had a what do you call it, stroke about 2 years ago. Took away 15 years or something of his life. He was 74. He just became old instantly. Lost a lot of physical abilities, and he was just depressed for a year and a half. Whenever I met him, I was like, "Oh, hi, Dad, how you doing?" And he would just say, "Well, isn't it just time? Do I really have to sort of?" He didn't say it out loud, but he was basically saying, "Do I really have to hang around for this shit?" But he still had the abilities, not the physical abilities he had before, but he's still functional. He's his brain is in good shape and all that. He's a little bit slower than he used to be, which he obviously kind of hates, but it's still there. All the knowledge is there. So when he got on the right medication, instantly he was happy. He started reaching out. He started calling his children, checking out how we're doing. I have 3 sisters, and just instantly. So I wouldn't talk down medication of that sort.
Neither me.
Absolutely not. But
no, absolutely not.
But as long as you're trying to continue to grow somewhere instead of just, as you said, dealing with the symptoms.
Yeah, I always believe that intent really matters, and that's something I've shifted gears from. Is I want to live a life that is focused more on my intention than an expectation that I've put on a thing.
Yeah.
And going into a trip like this or any of this with strangers or anything, it's really easy to have expectations of, well, we'll do this, and it's going to be great, and they'll do this, and they'll love it, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, there's so many factors of, one, weather with Iceland or any of these other type of things that it's easy with expectation to fall to failure.
Oh, absolutely.
And then that to fall to disappointment, and that to feel like, well, I tried that and it didn't work out the way I thought it would, so I won't do that again.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go in with intention of, this trip, Bonnie and I had talked about our intention of this trip was to share a place we love with this group of people who chose to entrust us with coming with us.
It's awesome.
And of course it works out.
Yeah.
Of course it does, because it's not about us.
And going in with intention is exciting.
Yeah.
Because it's open. You're sort of like, I wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, you can kind of stay a little loose on the wheel, right?
Instead of having a fixed idea and then you just, then you're heartbroken, it doesn't work out perfectly the way you planned it. I have no idea what's supposed to happen.
No.
And that was the beauty, for example, when we went into Jurassic Park, as you guys
right. Which is
Stakholtskjál.
Okay.
Well, don't worry about that. Stakholtskjál. Well, Game of Thrones ravine, you can call it that. Going in there, if I would have had a specific plan for what was supposed to happen, no, it wouldn't have worked out. I had no idea whether people in the first place would actually sit down and breathe or not, So
as soon as you mentioned that, like I had looked at Bonnie and both of us kind of smiled.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh yeah. And then we both knew too that this has been valuable to us. And it accomplished a couple things. One was for this to work and be important, and we both believe in it, we have to commit to it as leaders of the group.
Oh, absolutely.
If they sniff bullshit on us in it, no one will dive in.
Yeah.
And luckily, that's what we're both into currently, right? Like at right time and place. And with that too, I know that's a thing that I had thought about before coming on the trip. Especially, we had just left this really great experience in Austin, Texas, with a group of people. I've got some friends down there who have run some businesses. Were the friends that kind of exposed me to a lot of different things with psychedelics, or hell, a lot of breath work or mental health work on yourself.
Yeah.
And Aubrey Marcus is the guy who runs it. He's a founder of a company called On It, and he's got a thing called Fit for Service. And that's the point of it, is like, until you can sort you're not of service to the people around you.
Oh, absolutely.
So the more that you can take care of your own vessel first, it's that idea of, you put your own oxygen mask on first before you help anyone else. Otherwise, you're a problem.
Oh, absolutely. I fully agree with that. Before you take care of yourself, everything else you'll do will be with intention.
And I mean, we left a really powerful weekend. Like they had done this big tribal games, and the overall vibe of the thing we were at was this the divine masculine.
Yeah.
And awakening that in us. And so we did all these things, and there was a poetry workshop where we all sat and wrote, and the focus of the poetry workshop was, who's hurt you the most in your life? I'd like you to write a poem to them. Or right to them, right? It's a poem if you've intended it to be a poem. It doesn't matter anything outside of that, if it rhymes or stanzas or anything. And forgive them.
Yeah.
And hearing people's stories and, trauma with parents and themselves, and mine's me.
Yeah.
That
I'm the same, actually. It's
right? And
more or less just me.
I'm my problem.
Yeah.
And it's always been me. And so figuring out how to, double that down, and like, that's a heavy weekend. And it's a heavy weekend to leave and come here, and both of us really felt very fortunate that we were home for less than 24 hours from Austin to getting on the flight to come here.
Yeah, okay.
And I was home for less than 48 hours before a previous trip that sent us to Austin. Allegedly, I have a place where my stuff is.
I was just going to say, you basically live in a washing machine.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we had just got back from a 3-week road trip and in Montana with our other group of friends and these other people, and sharing that experience with them and hitting that other thing and realizing, for me, it was another thing that just right time, right place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not involved with Fit for Service at all, and they were hosting this tribal games, which had a wrestling event and tug of war and all this type of stuff. And talking with Aubrey about coming down to podcast with him, and he was like, "Hey, we're hosting this thing. I think, would you want to be the MC of our big thing?" And I'm like, "Absolutely."
Oh, yeah.
And it makes me really uncomfortable to do.
Yeah.
But I looked at it as this opportunity to make this experience better for these people. And if he thinks I'm the guy for the job, who am I to not believe him?
And, dive in. It's a brilliant
That's
experience.
it.
Yeah.
Go all the way in and give everything to him. Leave. I can't compete anymore in the thing that I love, and so I have to find an outlet for that energy.
Oh, yeah.
That, and what, trying to boil down over time what it is I love about competing, other than I won.
Yeah.
Other than these type of things. And what I love about competing is the confidence that it's built in me as a person of I can perform when it counts.
Mm-hmm.
That if I'm slightly underprepared or I don't know or the anxiety is kicking in, push comes to shove, I can perform. And I've done it time and time again. And even when I've failed, the sun comes up the next day and no one gives a shit.
And I love how you describe it, that, you're sort of fully connected to the fact that whatever happened, you did your best.
Yeah, and that's all I can give you.
Yeah. And that's acceptance. That's forgiveness. That's loving who you are. And I've just seen fractions of what you were dealing with, all the knee stuff, and but what I really connect to there is, at 42, I'm standing in my place. We lived on the west side of town. I'm looking out the window, and I sort of had this midlife crisis thing. Fuck, is this it?
Yep.
Is this it? I obviously take my responsibility very seriously about delivering my kids better into the world than I was, and while at the same time giving them a full freedom to become whatever they want to be. It's not mine to control that either, but sort of to create a safe place for them to grow. I take that responsibility very seriously, but at the same time, around that age, it's quite common especially with men, because we're competitive. It's part of it's part of testosterone, basically.
Well, I believe competition's great for us.
Oh, absolutely. It's what's driven us.
It's just you have to reframe the outcome as
yeah.
whether or not it was a failure or a success.
But at that time, I sort of had this minor crash. It's like, fuck, is this it? We have a place, and I'm probably not going anywhere else in life, and this was thinking from a perspective of financially and stuff like. And again, there was a moment where, when is this? This is 2012. The following year, I go to Sedona, and things sort of open up, and I realize that that's the path I want to be. This is where I want to be going. But
Well, that's the beauty of it too. You can change.
But the absolute crash and the sadness and the sorrow of sort of facing that my masculinity wasn't gonna, be any more than this. So even though I've never been close to your level of competitiveness and strength,
it's relative.
Yeah, it's still. I really relate to what you were going through right there when you were just, yours were more traumatic. You were just stopped. And
perhaps I needed to be hit with a bigger hammer to get the point, right? Like,
yeah, maybe that's it. That's true. But series of surgeries and pain, and it's sort of it's different what it takes, but I really relate deeply.
I wouldn't go back and change it.
No, I really relate deeply with what you were going through, the feelings, and the need to find a new focus, and I love the way you've done that. I love the way you talk about where you've been, and wherever you can go from here. It's absolutely gorgeous, but look, I lost trace. Were we going somewhere with the Texas experience? But
just that it was really great and such incredible timing of coincidences.
Oh yes,
that we got paired
before.
Up.
Yeah, exactly.
And because you showed, like, I knew that I wanted to integrate stuff like that into our group because I do think it matters, and I do think that it's such a valuable tool of being able to recenter. Like, I know 6 deep breaths is all it takes to change.
Yeah,
it changes your blood pressure. It changes your cortisol levels. I can give you the science behind why this matters. It's not magic.
Absolutely.
It'll do it.
And it's like 20 years ago that they proved the ability to create or produce gray matter in the brain triples with living, if you live a life of meditation. You don't have to meditate for hours, just sort of sit down and breathe, and it's probably exactly what's happening with 6 deep breaths. It's just
it's funny, right? Like, meditation's a tricky one for me. I'm working on it. I can do breath work. I can do things like that.
Maybe your idea of meditation, because I saw you meditate. You were there, man.
I can do it.
Yeah.
I can do it, right? It helps for me to be in a place like that. That's a really easy environment and this beautiful piece of nature to meditate. I can do that.
Listen to the river go by. It's just,
I can do that.
Yeah.
But to sit on my couch, it's really hard. I can do it in the sauna. I can do it. Yeah. It works for me as a secondary thing to something I'm already doing. For me, one of the biggest drivers is time, because I know it's ticking down. You hear about how many people change their lives. If you get this terminal thing that, how would you live if you were told you had 2 months left to live?
Yeah.
Would you do what you did yesterday? Or does it light a fire under your ass? Yeah. And I got that at 31 when my dad passed away. I got it at 31 that, he had turned 62. He was 62 when he had passed, and I had turned 31 the day after he died.
Yeah, okay.
And it was just this hammer of halfway.
Yeah.
And if you're halfway, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing with it? And I've never been able to turn off that awareness of the clock.
That's beautiful.
Since.
It's a phenomenal. It's a healthy.
There's some punishment to it too. Oh. There's it doesn't lead well to relaxing.
Yeah.
It doesn't do well for me to meditate. Like, it's really hard for me to realize that this doing nothing for 10 minutes will buy me more progress after. But I can fix it and do it if I need that moment, so I need to go for a walk. Because the sitting still I don't do well.
Yeah.
But I can meditate and get that mindfulness and get all that when I'm going for a walk. I had a really interesting experience with it on a trip this summer. I got invited with some friends to go on a motorcycle trip. And we rode from Los Angeles up to Big Sur on the West Coast. Indian Motorcycle sponsored it and provided bikes for us, and
Awesome.
beautiful bikes.
Yeah.
These big, comfortable baggers, and this
Yeah.
big fairing and windscreen and stereo system and cruise control. They're lovely, lovely machines. And after we had got through Big Sur and we rode the Pacific Coast Highway through all that, there was a stretch of road afterwards that we just needed to cover.
Mm-hmm.
But it was about 3 hours worth of it, and straight, really nothing going on, not a ton of traffic. And so, I mean, I've got the bike on cruise control, and I'm listening to either Weezer or Sublime or something like that at the time, and it was right music, right place. And, you know, I don't have any hands on the bike, and I'm playing drums along with it on the gas tank, and just flow state.
Yeah.
And it was such this heavy meditative thing that it got really emotional. I cried for like 45 minutes during it, not
beautiful.
thinking of anything in particular, but just this gratitude.
Yeah.
And it was, I really not expected it. I mean, part of the big thing that always comes for me is this gratitude that I'm able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when my knee and everything was bad, like I couldn't even get in position on that motorcycle to sit, much less ride it for 11 hours a day for 3 days in a row. So the fact that my body has given me some ability back to even experience that, I'm very, very thankful. And because everything's busy, right? Like, it's not like I can't pay attention.
Yeah.
You're still riding a fucking motorcycle at 80 miles an hour,
Yeah.
you know, with your hands not on it, but, you know, the turns are slight and you're just kind of leaning with it, and the bike's now part of you, and I've been on it for a few days, and I'd owned a bike years and years ago too, and so there's nowhere to go. Like, there's nowhere to give that energy other than work through it in your head. And I mean, even we're on a group with 5 of us, we're not talking. We're on motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
You can't yell at each other. The headsets we had done for whatever reason weren't working great, and so we had all just not bothered.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was so great. It was so great that when I finished it, like, I sent that to the people that I feel have mentored me with those things of, like, this was an incredible thing. If there's any way you can ever find yourself this experience, I can't recommend it enough. It was as strong an experience for me as many of the bigger psychedelic experiences I've had, and I was really impressed by that. Now, I don't know that I enjoyed that experience as much without the other ones prior, but it doesn't matter. Still a great experience.
What I relate to, which I'm not sure if people that don't have ADHD will relate at the same level. Maybe. I have no idea. I just know that I learned as a young man, basically, that driving slowly made me a dangerous driver, and driving fast, I was fully focused.
Yes.
And what I'm relating to there, you know, that driving 80 miles an hour on a pretty good highway on a really nice bike, I have perfect focus on what I'm doing.
Oh, nothing. The world doesn't matter anymore.
And at the same time, I'm at ease.
Yeah.
This is, you know, it takes a lot of, what do you call it, stimulators or, you know, whatever for us to sort of, boom, you know, be here. You know, I used to do my homework with AC/DC or something, sat at 11, you know, because my mom never believed I was actually doing something as a child in my room, but it was the only way for me to sort of try at least to be there. So meditating on a bike at doing 80 miles an hour,
It's great.
I think that's an awesome idea.
It was great. You know, and I can get the same on a hike because the machine's busy.
Yeah.
It's like I've given the hardware something to do, so the software in my brain can run at a different pace because it's not needed.
My favorite way of coaching, you know, during COVID and all that stuff, you know, you had to go to Zoom and stuff like that. But during that time in Iceland, we were in quarantine the same way as a big part of the world did. So most of my favorite coaching sessions during that time were hiking, you know, walking basically. I would take whoever it was on a 90-minute walk. 20 minutes into it, we were sort of connected, and, you know, magic happened. And maybe I love it so much because of something, ADHD or whatever it is. It just works. I fully agree.
It really helps.
You're connected, and that's also what's happening in Stakkelskja while we were there. There's a walk in there. You're already sort of the energy is flowing already. The machine is still is on. But there are so many stimulators there at the same time. The phenomenal beauty of where you are, the sound of the river, the fulmar seagulls flying above. It's just all sorts of stuff that sort of would help connect. And I'm like you. I can't just sit down and meditate. I either do it with somebody, or I need to have an app or something that is sort of
guidance
every once in a while, giving me at least a suggestion of what I'm doing.
Even something as simple as changing the breath rhythm.
Oh, absolutely. Just counting in and counting out, anything. Just sitting down to meditate, I'm sort of, instantly I'm gone somewhere else,
And I guess where I'm finally going with that was, I know now on future trips that I'll be courageous enough to lead it.
Yeah.
But it's a big piece to throw out there, and it's less courageous, not less. It's not competitive, but look, it's less of a step for people who've already decided to come across the world to be next to us. They know what we're into.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You threw it at strangers.
Yeah.
And if you can do it.
Yeah. As I said earlier, I had this mutual hub that everybody connected to, which were you guys. I didn't realize the night before, and that morning I was sort of starting to see how the energy in the group was, sort of how it was lining up. But I also did a build-up to this, in the bus in the morning. I told them, at some stage today, we'll be in a magical place.
Yeah.
A place where you can decide to leave whatever you like behind, and a place where you can take whatever you like with you, to sort of integrate into your life from there on. And nothing dramatic, It took a little bit of courage to throw it at people that I didn't really know. But that's one of the real beauties of growing older. That after 40-something, I somehow just suddenly lost
gives a fuck
the fear of other people's opinions. It's just like you throw it out there, and if it wouldn't have worked, so be it.
So be it. We'll move on.
But it actually just worked perfectly. For me, you're talking about the lineup and the coincidences of how it worked out. For whoever's listening, I wasn't the designated guide for this trip. So God knows how it worked out, but it's a fair chance that your intention for what you wanted somehow lined it up in a way where the other guide suddenly had to go and do something else, and I was called in to do the job.
And it's not like I believe the trip is worse with the other guide.
I know that guy, and he's brilliant.
It's a different trip.
Yeah.
And I feel very fortunate. To be on the timeline that had you as our guide.
Yeah.
Because there's a very, very close one that he was our guide, and I'm not sitting here right now doing this. And so, the ripples in the pond have affected my future already. And then we'll have this conversation, and then this goes out. And now it affects the people that weren't on the trip with us. Mm-hmm. And, and what I hope is that this podcast can at least open people up as another guide or reference to accessing you.
Well, absolutely. What I'm hoping more than anything else is that if they have been asleep to that idea, that the idea might waken up, that walking into the forest and just breathing for a while might actually change their lives.
Well, and we have scientific proof of that.
Oh yeah.
We have proof to show that a 30-minute walk in a green setting changes changes everything. Changes anxiety levels. The chemicals that support depression drop by 60%. There's all of these things, and so that's why this lockdown and seclusion are so dangerous, because we are a tribal species, and to pretend that we're not. I mean, look at any football stadium and tell me people aren't interested in having an identity of connected to some type of a tribe.
Oh, absolutely.
When They didn't play the sport with those
that,
people.
That hormone, or what you call it, that we produce when we fall in love.
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin.
Yeah.
We produce that in mass quantities when we connect through a mutual something. All vouching for the same team, you're
Sure.
we're one.
Or your political party,
or whatever. Whatever.
It doesn't care.
Whatever.
Whether it's positive or negative.
It doesn't care. That's brilliant. Exactly, and where was I going with this?
Just the oxytocin dump from this.
The experiences. What I'm sort of probably trying to say is that you can have this experience anywhere. As long as you do it, the more people that are aligned with you on the same path, the stronger the experience will be. The more oxytocin you will produce.
Well, it's the feeling you get from your mother, at birth. It's oxytocin's the chemical that gets released when women have babies.
Oh, wow.
Which overwhelms all of the negative parts of having a kid. Which
just imagine
being very pregnant and having a person come out of you, which
going
is
through
crazy.
Insane pain, and just immediately.
And the oxytocin is so good. People are like, we could do that again.
Where I was going with this, I remember now, is that you can have the same social experiences through Zoom or through an online media, but you don't produce oxytocin.
Is that right?
At the levels you do when you do it with
not the same.
Personal contact. So you can have the experience, but it's more like a politically, not politically, more like a calculated way. It's I put this in and this comes out and I know this will be the reward and blah. But it's at the same time it's not the emotional experience that creates the real bond, the connection.
No.
And the oxytocin is sort of like a magical.
Right. Like there's no chance of any of the people who were on that trip that I could ever look at again and feel that they're not a friend.
Oh, absolutely not. We're a tribe now.
Yeah, for sure. We have shared an experience, my friends.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, I'll share other experiences with other people, but I'll never get to share this one.
I don't think there was a single person on that trip, me included, that didn't change in some way during that period of 6 days.
It was really good. And it really opened myself and Bonnie up a lot to the idea that this is important. Us getting to do this and us getting to travel with people and us opening doors and maybe coming with us relieves some fear of going to another country or doing any of this. And I always describe Iceland as travel I find to be really important in general for people. Just literal perspective shift, that you're seeing the world from a different place than where you grew up.
Yeah.
And provides you different people who also have different experiences. And if you get locked into the idea that your experiences are correct, it's really tough to take other ones on instead of just different.
Yeah.
And we are such a competitive creature that because what we're competing for as far as needs has really gone away, we don't quite know how to focus that competitive thing out yet.
What happened for me on this trip is you had 20 people, me included, 19 people and the Icelander. And we all used this mutual ground to go from wherever we were. Everybody's at a different place, but everybody somehow, something clicked, everybody saw something happening or experienced, connected to something. And their course changed in a little way from here on. So, it's sort of, and I really felt strongly with at least a big part of the group, this tribal connection that, we are somehow part of the family from here on. It's just, and this is my favorite thing in the world to experience, is to go through some real shit experiences with people, connecting on that level. And, it's so real.
And Iceland to me has
not,
always provided it.
It's not a new toy that gives me great joy for 12 hours or 20. You know, this is something that just sits with you, and it's just it's phenomenal.
I definitely fall into. Yeah, I don't know what else we get, right? I know that at some point when the time comes and the body gives up, that chemically we get a big dump of DMT and there's an acceptance on to whatever the next thing is, the next realm. And, you know, with stories of that, of near death, and people see this, you know, my life flash before my eyes and all this, I'm looking forward to that ride. My life's going to be fun. And if I get to relive it again in that moment, I'll be damn sure that the experiences were worth my time here.
I agree. I agree. You know, it would be the greatest fulfillment of my life it's just to be able to stop, look back, and realize that I did the experiences I wanted to have, and I connected, and it mattered somehow. That, you know, not that I leave something egotistical, massive behind, but you know, but somehow that we grew together.
I don't care if the ripples know that it came from me.
Yeah,
that doesn't matter because I got them from somewhere else.
Oh,
I didn't. I'm not the origination of any of this.
I don't have a single original idea.
No.
Not a single original idea, but I can be a brilliant channel for it.
I mean, what we have now with technology is such an ability to connect to information that it's all out there. We can find books. We can, you know, listen to different people, whether that's Ram Dass or any of these other type of, you know, leaders. In the same way, I want to listen to intellectuals that aren't as spiritual, whether that's Michael Pollan or any authors I like, or you know, probably, you know, biggest influence on my life as far as someone like that I remember the first time thinking like that they're doing something I'm really into is Anthony Bourdain.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Anthony Bourdain, but was a chef and then traveled a lot doing a show, No Reservations, and I've just passed away a few years ago due to suicide and lots of depression, was an addict and those type of things. And I remember reading something another artist had wrote about it, and basically saying that, you know, where does the most interesting man in the world get to talk about his problems? And at some point, as a society, as a species, to go forward, we have to come to the conclusion that trauma and pain aren't a competition. And I get a lot of that from people due to my story with chronic pain and with my knee, of people will write me a message and talk to me about their injury, but then say, well, it's not as bad as yours. And I very, very quickly respond with, that doesn't make yours not hurt.
No.
Does that make yours hurt less? Because
it's still your experience.
Yeah, you don't know a difference.
Yeah.
So you don't have a frame of reference, and everyone tolerates things differently.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm just sorry you're hurting.
Yeah.
Because I know what it does.
Yeah.
And, you know, luckily I've been very, very fortunate to not have any real big bouts with depression. But the chronic pain thing switched me on to realize how scary it was, because that's how I look at depression now. While I was in chronic pain, it wasn't like there weren't any good times and I just laid around moaning.
Mm-hmm.
No, I still lived my life the best way I could, but I was aware that when the day ended and I was by myself again, that's what was there with me.
Yeah.
That partner was always there. And the less going on, the louder they are.
And it just wears you out.
And depression's the same way. Depression's having someone tug at your shirt all day for your attention, but you can't give them attention to make it go away. They're just going to keep tugging at your shirt.
One of my sort of, how should I put it? One of my main purposes in life is to disconnect the ego. And, you know, I'm not saying ego is good or bad. You know, ego is there. But ego seems to be what I need to be able to connect to stuff. And at the same time, ego seems to want to make itself so important in the process that it becomes the purpose. You know, I don't know if this makes sense. You know,
it does. This is something I've thought a lot on.
You know, because I don't seem to be able to live without it, but at the same time, I need to learn how it's, you know, I channel through it and not because of it. And in my experience, it seems to have the ability to take any experience and make it about it, you know. You know, you know, oh, are you in pain? And then I somehow bring it to me and about me. And my first sort of experience of that sort, this is a little off topic, but
there's no off topic
there is
at this
no
point. What is
topic,
it?
yeah. You know, I was sitting in a funeral. It doesn't matter who it was, but I was sitting in a funeral and I was crying. And I realized I was crying because I felt sorry for myself that this person died. And I really, you know, I sort of had this epiphany, you know, whoa, this is what ego does. You know, it's about me. Somebody just, you know, actually died of old age, and, you know, it's, you know, a healthy way to go in that sense. Probably, you know, what all of us would fantasize about, you know, just sort of being happy with, you know, life is done and you've done well and, you know, you're gone. But I was crying because I felt sad that I wouldn't have, you know, that connection anymore. And in a way, I'm not saying it's a bad feeling, you know. I'm just saying that I felt it was interesting that the ego made it to be about it, you know, about me, instead of the person that I was saying goodbye to. And ever since then, you know, again and again and again, I've gotten to places somewhere where I sort of have this epiphany again. Oh no, it's
interesting when you get better at catching it, right? And you're like, there you are.
Oh, absolutely. And it's
there
like,
you are.
You know, I love you, but I don't need you.
Yeah.
It's like, you know.
You know, I think for the ego, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, searching for, let's just call it enlightenment, want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that
I agree.
Works. It doesn't for me.
Yeah.
I'll say that. For me, there's two sides of that coin. And there's the side of my ego that wants to hide and protect insecurities, and it wants to be right, and it wants to be thought of in the light that I want to be viewed as.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side of my ego that wants progress and wants to be a better version of me, you know, which is, you know, the same as progress, and wants to win. I mean, look, I love running my business successfully and seeing it grow and trying to pour all the energy into it and try to make it bigger, because it's fun and it's a challenge.
And, you know, healthy ambition, basically. You know.
It's nonstop problem solving.
It's not about killing somebody else. It's about, you know, building something prosperous.
I had it rear its ugly head. Today.
Yeah.
So one of the guys that I had on the podcast recently, George Bryant, he's coming to St. Louis to work with us to look at my businesses and talk with us and look at plans and strategy and what we can do to scale and grow and make it to the next level.
Okay.
And, you know, he sent me over a list of things to kind of have in order. And as soon as I get that list, this anxiety pops up of like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And he's going to know it.
They call it the imposter syndrome.
Of course. Yeah. That's the biggest. I run into it constantly.
Yeah.
And so this idea that like, fuck, he's going to know I don't know what I'm doing. And then like, I'm going to be really embarrassed. And then the game's up that like, Matt's a fraud.
Yeah.
Right. Meanwhile, none of that's true.
Of course not.
You know, maybe I don't have the exact answers or numbers or whatever offhand, and I don't run my business that way. But I can feel that anxiety, and I can feel part of me wanting to run from it as a, fuck, I'm going to be found out. And if I'm found out, how does that translate to the people who work under me that don't think I know what the fuck I'm doing?
Yeah.
And so I can see how a business owner would be like, I'm good. I'd rather not do this. Now's not a time.
Yeah.
We're too busy with X, Y, and Z, right? Why there's an excuse we can't do this. Meanwhile, I know George, and I know his intention is to help me across the board. And until
Absolutely.
I can admit that there's clearly some things we could do better,
Yeah.
it's not valuable. If he comes in and I just go, fuck that, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst thing that happens, right? He shows up, provides a bunch of information. None of it works. We're still doing this. Nothing changes. I'm still doing exactly what I was doing that's working.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe there's something here I've missed.
Maybe he can add another dimension or an angle or something that,
Because...
Or maybe he can turn something around brilliantly. But, I just want to throw this in there, that the idea of you not knowing what you're doing, or the imposter voice in there, you know precisely what you're doing. And what I've heard from you and seen from you, recently, is that you pick very carefully the stuff that you need to have hands-on, and you pick good people to do the other stuff that you don't need to have hands-on. And so while you have the vision and the idea very clear about where you're going, you're absolutely doing perfectly as a man running his own business.
Yeah, sure. I don't always feel it.
No.
I have days that I do and days I don't.
But it's, an entrepreneur that gets stuck in accounting dies, and his business dies too. An accountant that gets stuck in the role of an entrepreneur, it's probably the same way. I don't have the experience from the other side, but
I knew in the couple accounting classes I took in college that if this was ever a thing I need to focus on, I have to hire someone else.
Yeah, me too. I had the exact. Even my teacher.
This is one of the first things I need to hire as soon as I can afford it, so that I don't have to think about the taxes, the write-offs, all of that complicated thing that even still getting emails from my accountant about stuff, I feel like I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Like I've failed a test that someone's going to call and be like,
IRS is coming. It's
yeah. And that's never, they work for me.
Yeah.
They want to help. Like, why wouldn't I let them?
Yeah.
Fascinating that we'll do that, right? That we'll shut this door.
My imposter syndrome works precisely the same way. I have this feeling that I need to know everything. That if I don't know everything, then I'm lying or faking it.
Yeah.
Nobody knows everything. That.
Well, as soon as you know everything, you can't learn anything new.
Well, you're probably pretty limited already by then. It's sort of, yeah.
It's funny, right? Because I would say I was more confident in what I knew probably in my early 30s or late 20s.
Oh, yeah.
And now I know a lot more shit.
Yeah.
But I'm now aware of how much I don't know. And so
more aware of.
Yes, right. Whereas before, this ego and confidence of I have it figured out.
16-year-old me simply knew the answer.
Of course.
It was just there was no doubt. It's like that.
Yeah. Teenagers are it's an interesting age with enough chemicals going on in the body. I'm sure that there's an important survival mechanism to why we have that window.
And it's maybe something worth mentioning that part of that is a very high level of testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
And as we grow older, it starts dwindling, it starts dropping.
Unless you decide to put it back in.
that's what I'm getting at. I've told you already that, I got to this point where everything was kind of gray again, or, I was doing a lot of stuff that was supposed to work in a way where I would be fulfilled and happy. But it was still kind of gray. Felt depressed, but I wasn't depressed. It just felt like lack of purpose, especially lack of drive.
Going through the motions.
Yeah. And I heard this doctor on the radio talking about the symptoms of low testosterone, and I just I called
which are
that
kind
guy.
of everything.
Yeah. I called that guy in the afternoon. And so what I'm getting at is that I think now with the information and knowledge we have, we actually have the ability of sort of fully using both abilities, or meaning that now you have the knowledge. You understand how little you know while you already know a lot more than you used to, but you can also get the drive you need to keep moving. Because we tend to, as we sort of grow older, we tend to sort of become more kind of at ease with what everything. And it for a long time it was one of my greatest fears that I would end up like one of those dudes in their 70s or something that is just happy with watching it all on National Geographic and never leaving their house.
There's nothing.
But you don't have to go there.
There's nothing that scares me more than that person who says, I don't know what happened. I was 20 yesterday.
Yeah.
And to me, being that time's such a big motivator, my concern is slowing it down.
Yeah.
And the only way I have figured out any method to slow it down is I have to be uncomfortable and I have to be within a new experience, because I'm so switched on a new experience that it requires new pathways are getting cut and new emotions are getting written into the chart and all these type of things, and new I have more now to compare what I know against. Whereas, man, with the last 9 to 5 regular job I had, weeks disappear, months disappear. Next month is tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. You look back and nothing happened.
Right.
Nothing happened.
I got that was very, very loud to me. I'd gone on a 2-week trip to raft the Grand Canyon, and that was 2 weeks with no cell phone. It was a very interesting experience. 2 weeks with no cell phone while I'm doing this entrepreneur thing, which is crazy. Luckily, I had a business partner that was helping and things like that at the time. But I also didn't go in a building for 2 weeks, like in a thing. Yeah. And that trip was so big and so changing of experience to me. And I got done, and I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
It's 2 weeks. Nothing fucking happened. Everyone I knew was doing the same shit that they were doing 14 days ago, and nothing...
Yeah.
There wasn't. They were in routine. And then to me, that day-to-day routine that you're just floating along and you don't have to be switched on, of course your brain will just fill in the parts. It knows the answer. It doesn't have to pay attention. It doesn't have to be awake. It doesn't have to fire at full speed.
It's the exact same thing as driving back home the same route every day, and you don't remember passing any lights or anything.
Big stretches of it. Autopilot that we have on our machine is really incredible.
It's hard, I one of my greatest fears, and I really feel that while living consciously, you don't have to go down that way or down that route, and getting medicine that helps with the dropping, this fast dropping of testosterone levels in the body. Yeah, changed my life.
And I wonder about that, right? So I wonder about the dropping in testosterone, and I don't have enough information, I honestly haven't looked into it, to determine like what historically it's been. Like what was it 200 years ago? And did we see the same drop in testosterone, or 500 years ago? But we don't have any way to probably...
I actually believe that it's the way it's always been. Not necessarily what kind of quantity or, amount it would be, but growing up, I grew up with this idea that came from my grandmother that there was no way to take, put responsibility on men until after 40. Men were just boys until 40.
Perfect.
And
I got a couple years left.
Yeah. And so I thought the reason was that we would have grown up so dramatically by 40 that we would finally understand, take responsibility.
40 is definitely an age where I'm like, I can't pretend I'm a kid anymore, right? This gray hair is getting hard to ignore.
But what turned out to be my experience is that at 40-something, 43, 4, 5 years old, probably simply my testosterone level had lowered so much that I felt more empathy. I felt, I was... Yeah. I don't want to say more feminine, but... No, but that drive was calmer.
A little bit less willing to run right into the fire for the sake of running into it.
Exactly. And it sort of dawned on me that it's quite possible that a huge part of our character is simply hormone levels in the body.
Right.
It's just, which I find phenomenally interesting. And
so I know that in more tribal societies, they don't see it. Yeah. It doesn't drop the same. And I think part of that is due to
The need for survival.
well, say through our early 20s, right? Think about like the level of things that we're competing at. We're competing for a mate. We're trying to find a job. We're trying to find our place in the world. We need to make money.
Yeah.
Maybe sports are still going on, athletics, any of these type of things. And so testosterone is a very valuable chemical that's getting used. Well, people that aren't fucking anymore, people that aren't competing in any way, shape, or form anymore, people that aren't pushing their body to grow muscle,
Yeah.
and people that sit down all day. Why is this a needed chemical? The body says, cool, we don't need that anymore. We'll shut it down.
Let's just turn it off.
And that's what it does.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a bit of nature and the nurture side of what causes that shift. And that's why, man, I find competition to be so valuable. Whether, and again, my focus with competition is I don't have any interest in whether or not I beat you. I don't give a shit. I gotta know that I gave it hell when I was told my turn is up.
It's something I heard for the first time with Tony Robbins, and just sort of really connected to that simple fact that man that is not in progress is unhappy. It doesn't matter what progress, or if you're not growing, you're dying.
I believe that.
And it just
blows
dawned
me.
on me.
People do that with the weight room, and like I've been lucky enough to take a lot of correlations from my time doing that, and apply it to everything else in my life. And it's such a mirror that it's really worked well. And that's a very, very valid point. Like I know so many people that work out with this intention of like, I'm just trying to maintain. I'm like, fuck, does that mean? Maintain what? That's not there. There isn't a coast that the body understands.
No.
It's either adapting or it's not. And I want to adapt. I want to continue. And not only that, be aware and have gratitude for the idea that we live in such a unique time in human history that I get to adapt to the stress I choose.
Yeah.
I don't have to be hot or cold anymore. I don't have to be hungry. I don't have to train. I mean, how fortunate it is to explain to, let's just say, the Civil War era, turn of the century farmers, people like that I have spare time in my day to go to a place to pick up weights, to build muscles I don't need to survive. I go and do fake work. That's crazy. It's a crazy thing that we choose to do. And the same is, that's part of the issue we have with food currently. We've never had an abundant stretch. It's only been 100 years.
Yeah.
Hell, my country's only been around for like 6 people.
Well, apart from the U.S., for most of the world, it's only been 60 years.
Right.
Sort of 70 years since the end of the Second World War. It sort of flipped around.
And the same for us.
Yeah.
But we live in such a time that we think 10 years ago is forever. Why haven't we made this astronomical change and shift and everything in 10 years when of course we haven't.
Yeah.
And especially how much we've evolved as a society and culture versus physically.
Yeah.
Because, do I think at some point we could evolve away from needing to store fat the way that we do because it's prepared for when there's lean times and we're going to have a fuel source? Maybe. But at some point we would have to selectively choose people that don't gain fat to continue on. And we're not exactly following Darwin's system as a species anymore, which is great.
And it's also a matter of where you come from. What's your background? Because in cold areas on the planet, they needed fat. In warm areas on the planet, they eat more carbohydrates.
Right. It really varies on your own genome. And not genome, your own ancestry about like what type of fuel source your body wants to use.
But also, it might be one of the reasons for why Nordic nations are growing faster when you come to a life where you don't need to survive the cold, you don't need to do a lot of hard work, but your food is still phenomenally energetic. And then we added sugar on top of everything, sort of.
Yeah, your body doesn't care.
No.
Your body adapts very, very well
I
to
actually
the stimulus you
strongly
give it.
experience that when I'm in warm places, that my sort of desire or call for food and energy changes dramatically. You know, I come from a cold climate, so it's tough for me to go to somewhere really warm. And while there, you know, the first maybe week or two, I'm mainly, you know, my ideas are mainly about fruit and liquid, you know, water.
Interesting.
You know, just it's kind of interesting, you know, because in Iceland, I'm thinking about steaks.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of that's where
I'll
I
take
am,
something a little lighter here and
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah, it's just I found it really interesting when it sort of dawned on me in Spain at some point that it's phenomenal that I'm just thinking about oranges. You know, where is that coming from? You know, it's like, so God knows, you know, or something knows. Whether it's where we, you know, our background obviously is a huge part of who we are and how our genes are built, but maybe the surroundings that you know that you come from are playing a big part.
I think
I don't
all
know,
that matters. I think all that matters genetically.
But that being said, you know, this is nothing new. We've known that this for quite a long time now. What we are learning now, at least in my case, you know, this is just something I've sort of been waking up to in the last few years, is that we have the knowledge and the ability to form and be whoever we want to be. Not just mentally, but now we have the ability to do it physically. You know, we haven't figured out how to live forever, and in a way, I'm kind of happy about that. You know, it's
Like it makes it important.
yeah,
Having
you know,
a finite timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest drive of man in his, you know, in history of man. But we can choose. Most of, you know, obviously all sorts of things can happen in life. I'm not saying that this is something that is guaranteed, but generally you can choose whether you want to live the next 20, 30, 40 years slowly dying, or if you want to be fully energetic, going at it for the whole time. You know, are you going to go sort of with the sword in the air?
Memento Mori,
you know,
right?
you know,
Like that Rage Against the Dying of the Light.
Yeah. Are you going to be holding the sword or the remote control? You know, that's your choice.
Take the sword every time.
Yeah.
I'll take the sword. I'm not interested in watching other people's lives.
Yeah.
Not nearly as much.
No.
Only if it's giving me an idea of a place to go.
Yeah.
So on that, like we're coming into right around 2 hours. And,
Oh wow.
This was great. Where can
brilliant.
people locate you online if they want email or more access or?
Easiest way is just Icelandic Adventure on Instagram. DM me for any information or
Perfect.
ideas. If you need any assistance with planning your trip in Iceland, whether it's with me or without me, just
I imagine we will do another trip together
drop
at
me a
some
line.
point.
Oh, absolutely. Our trip just started, man.
I believe
Yeah.
that very, very much. I believe you and I. And then, I mean, how you live down the street. You live literally
The chances of that, you know, it's just
200 yards from my friend that I stay with here every time.
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Man, thanks, universe. Brother,
Thanks, man.
it's a joy.
Yeah.
I love you very much, buddy.
Love
And
you
I
too.
really appreciate all the openness and sharing and how much you elevated a trip. I've been here a lot.
Yeah.
And I have a really great connection to this country and the landscape and the planet and my friends here. And I know how important it is for me to come back and touch base and get my compass reset here.
Mm.
And this was one of the best trips, if not the best trip I've ever been on, and you were a really big part of that.
That's awesome, dude.
And I thank you. So
You too.
thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you next week.